Donald Trump hosted a highly unlikely Friendsgiving on Friday at the White House for the incoming mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani. Most people were expecting fireworks, but they did not expect them to be the Katy Perry kind.
Just days ago, you referred to President Trump as a despot who betrayed the country. You said you'd be his worst nightmare and accused him of having a fascist agenda. Are you planning to retract any of these remarks?
I've been called much worse than a despot, so it's not.
This didn't just go wrong, it detonated. The political chessboard flipped mid-move, the late-night spotlight became a laser, and everyone walked in expecting a polite handshake. Then walked out into an internet firestorm. One exposure, one unexpected political chemistry. And suddenly, alliances look less like strategy and more like reality TV. Stay with me, because the twist nobody saw coming didn't just shock the audience. It blindsided the people standing in the blast zone. This is the moment tomorrow's headlines are being written.
Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay, you can just say yes.
Okay, all right.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't know.
I don't mind. Who are we kidding? I don't even know what despot means. Call me whatever you want. I mean, they have the vibe of a wealthy, elderly gay man at the Cheesecake Factory ordering his shy young boyfriend dessert.
He really ran an incredible race, and I congratulated him. It's an amazing thing.
You're enjoying this. Hit subscribe. It helps more than you realize. The internet hadn't even finished wiping down the counters from the last political food fight before it was dragged back into the kitchen. Apron on, ready to burn another meal. 1 minute, Mamdani was public enemy #1 in Trump world. The next, suddenly he's the misunderstood cousin, not exiled, just misread. Apparently needing time to grow into the family.
There was a blizzard last night, an avalanche of angry posts on Truth Social from guess who? Guess who? Our president, I know I've said this before, but for real, this time he went completely off the rails last night. The man who is allegedly running the country banged out an onslaught of posts and reposts in a furious social media blitzkrieg that started at 7:09 p.m., went on nonstop until almost midnight. From 7 to 12, he posted 160 times.
And right in the middle of this ideological whiplash, late-night television calmly lifts the curtain and lets everyone see the strings wobbling. What makes this whole thing deliciously ridiculous isn't that minds change. It's how loudly everyone pretends they never did.
What a turn of events! It was like he was giving a wedding toast to his new son-in-law. He's effusive. It's almost as if, and I know this sounds crazy, it's almost as if Trump doesn't have any real political convictions at all. He just says whatever, whenever. I mean, look at these two. They're smiling. He's grabbing his hand. He's touching him all over. He could not keep his hands off the Zohran. I mean, get a Lincoln bedroom, you two. He touched him more in that press conference than he's touched Melania all year.
Minds change all the time. Usually with the grace of a weather vane caught in a hurricane. It's not the change that's shocking. It's the speed, the enthusiasm, and the absolute lack of shame required to pretend. Yesterday never happened.
I wonder if Melania is going to be at the White House Peace Summit tomorrow, because that is going to be something. Trump is opening the doors of the Oval Office to the incoming mayor of New York, and he's being very gracious about it. He wrote, "Communist mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, has asked for a meeting." Now that is going to be fun. The ultra-liberal Muslim mayor of New York sitting down with the MAGA gorilla. I mean, if that isn't a metaphor for everyone's Thanksgiving dinner this year, I don't...
Trump doesn't just revise positions. He rewrites them with the confidence of someone who assumes the internet has the memory span of a goldfish on Nike. Unfortunately for him, the internet is less goldfish and more elephant, with receipts for a while. Mahoney lived in that familiar Trump-built purgatory. The holding cell for people allegedly responsible for everything from the economy, collapsing to the suspicious texture of American hamburgers. Then suddenly the tone shifts. The same figure is no longer a villain, not even an irritant. Now he's being framed as reasonable, potentially useful, a guy enjoying an unexpected political glow, courtesy of Trump's favorite genre, the reality TV redemption arc. And let's be clear, this isn't some subtle evolution of thought. No one thinks it is. That's the problem. The exposure stings because it highlights a pattern everyone recognizes. Today's sworn enemy becomes tomorrow's convenient ally the moment the numbers twitch in the right direction. Principles stretch. Memory gets selective. Consistency becomes optional. And somehow, it's all delivered with a straight face, as if none of this is even remotely unusual.
It's an average of every 2 minutes for 5 hours straight. You want to see what that looks like? I'll show you what that looks like, because it's quite... This is it. That's what he did last. Hey, do you know how long you have to be on the toilet to post that much? I mean, what is he eating? And the posts themselves were all over the place. Obama, Biden, sedition, Christmas, and you can tell he was watching Fox News, because at one point he inquired about getting a reverse.
Warming to Mamani doesn't read as political growth. It reads like political convenience trying to cosplay as wisdom. This isn't framed as reconsideration. There's no reflective pause, no moment where past statements are weighed, acknowledged, or corrected. It's just a rebrand slapped on overnight, like a fresh coat of paint over cracked walls. And that's where Kimmel's quiet dismantling really stings. There's no need for accusations. The footage does the work on its own. The contradiction is the punchline. Suddenly, the man who was once branded as part of the problem is floated as part of the solution. The same rhetoric that treated Mamani like a liability now handles him like a chess piece worth protecting. Kimmel doesn't rush it. He lets it breathe. And the longer it sits in the open, the funnier it gets. The audience watches one clip bleed into the next and realizes this story isn't about Mamani at all. It's about Trump betting that repetition can overwrite reality. But repetition fails when the contrast is this sharp, and the warm-up isn't subtle either. It arrives wrapped in flattery, dressed up as pragmatism.
This guy Mamdani is a young, charismatic, very attractive American who was born in a country whose name the president can't pronounce. If he isn't careful, Trump might make him his next wife. And one more thing before we forge ahead. It is Thursday night, and that means it's time for a shout-out to our friends at the FCC, who we know are watching so closely. It is time to bleep and blur the big TV moments of the week, whether they need it or not. It is This Week in Unnecessary.
Suddenly, Mamani is a figure worth considering, worth listening to, worth keeping in the conversation. Yesterday's problem becomes today's potential asset, with no connective tissue to hold the story together. It's not just that Trump changed his mind, it's how casually he behaves as if the previous one never existed. He doesn't walk back the old attacks. He simply steps over them like yesterday's newspaper left on the driveway, and Kimmel lifts that newspaper straight into the camera. Frame the sudden friendliness toward Mamani. Makes the past hostility feel less like conviction and more like improvisation, as if every stance is rented, never owned, as if positions or costumes pulled from a rack, swapped out depending on the stage lighting. Kimmel isn't playing prosecutor here. He's the person pointing at a spinning weather vane and calmly noting that it was pointing the opposite direction 5 minutes ago. No shouting required. The spin is loud enough on its own. The result is that Trump doesn't come off as adaptable. If yesterday's fire can turn into today's handshake without a word of explanation, how seriously was yesterday ever meant to be taken? That question hangs in the air, a perfectly timed comedic pause that never needs a drum roll.
Now, most presidents at the turkey pardon keep it light. They make a few bad puns, they wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and they go back to work. But that's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump used the opportunity to brag about all the wars he's ending, how low his imaginary prices are now, and out of nowhere took shots at the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois.
The mayor was a low IQ person. The mayor is incompetent, and the governor is a big fat slob.
Trump's history makes this moment land harder because it isn't an isolated spin. It slides neatly into a familiar pattern. Loyalty is temporary. Enemies rotate quickly. And ideological certainty is often just a costume worn for effect. Today's target becomes tomorrow's utility player, depending on the week's strategic needs, and when that reflex is exposed, Trump looks less like a steadfast leader and more like a child hurriedly rearranging chess pieces after realizing the audience knows the rules. The warmth toward Mamdani doesn't read as changed conviction. It reads like a changed script. Kimmel's framing lets viewers see not just the contradiction, but the machinery behind it. The camera doesn't need to zoom in for the cracks to appear, they're structural. At one point, the rhetorical shift becomes so extreme it feels like two entirely different characters sharing the same body. The voice is the same. The memory isn't, and forgetting gets harder when internet archives act like a permanent chalk outline around every dramatic pivot. This sudden softening also erodes the narrative discipline Trump likes to project. If positions can melt and reform this quickly, the image of unwavering certainty starts to collapse. Certainty loses its gravity when it turns into a revolving door. Kimmel doesn't speculate about motives. He doesn't have to. He simply lets the audience watch Trump contradict. Trump. That's the most effective kind of exposure, because it doesn't rely on interpretation. It relies on sequence. What emerges isn't a story of growth or compromise. It's a story of convenience masquerading as evolution. Now,
one of his posts was a clip from his cameo in Home Alone 2, which I sincerely believe is the last time Donald Trump was happy. And after this tweeting frenzy, he passed out and was back at it at 5:48 a.m., declaring Truth Social is the best. There is nothing even close. I don't know. I still think chlamydia is better, but that's just me. Here's what I wonder. What was Melania doing during this 5-hour Manic Monday marathon? Hiding under the Christmas tree?
Schiff also turns Mamani into an oddly secondary character. He's less a political figure and more a prop in a much larger performance of inconsistency. The applause, the disdain, the sudden diplomatic warmth, all of it responds to Trump's immediate needs. Not to any stable assessment of Mamani's positions, Kimmel's restraint forces the audience to confront the absurdity without the distraction of outrage. The laughter comes from recognition. The recognition comes from contrast. And that contrast makes the entire reversal feel almost slapstick. It's the political equivalent of loudly announcing you hate pineapple on pizza, then being photographed the next day ordering extra pineapple with visible enthusiasm. Figures from those same camps suddenly become acceptable. Under the right conditions, consistency starts to look less like a moral line and more like a flexible business strategy. That's why this moment lands so cleanly. It doesn't require guessing what Trump really believes. It simply shows what he's willing to say when circumstances shift. And in this case, the shift is dramatic enough to make even casual observers pause. The warming to Mamani doesn't arrive wrapped in cautious diplomacy. It arrives like a switch flipped behind the curtain. The lighting in the room changes, and everyone is expected to pretend it's always been this warm, not change.
Thanksgiving, everybody. I mean, seriously, though. He says a lot of crazy stuff. In that same press conference, he said there have been no murders in Washington, D.C. in the last 6 months because of him. There have been 62 murders in Washington, which already indicates a vivid imagination. But does he really look at himself in the mirror and go, I am thin? I am so thin, I can comment on others who aren't.
So, Governor Pritzker, if you're listening, let's get your act together. Invite us in. I had a little bit of a Pritzker joke. I was going to talk about Pritzker and size, but when I talk about Pritzker, I get angry because he's not letting us do the
Kimmel less role as the quiet observer turns that lighting trick into a spotlight. The inconsistency isn't buried under commentary, it's exposed through timing. And the result is that Trump doesn't appear strategically complex. He appears strategically transparent. The maneuver reads less like chess and more like musical chairs with rhetoric. When the music changes, so does the posture. There's also a kind of tragic comedy in how confidently Trump leans into the new warmth. No hedging, no visible discomfort, no friction left over from the hostility that came before. It's as if the earlier statements were written on a dry erase board and wiped clean overnight. He behaves as though the timeline itself is a suggestion, not a record. That narrative whiplash exposes a deeper weakness in Trump's approach to political storytelling. When every conflict is framed as total warfare and every opponent as existentially dangerous, there's no graceful exit. Warmth after demonization doesn't read as reconciliation. It reads as damage control, and damage control rarely looks dignified. The sudden friendliness toward Mamdani forces the past attacks into an uncomfortable corner. If Mahoney is acceptable now, what does that say about the earlier characterization? Was it exaggerated? Tactical? Disposable? Every answer undercuts the seriousness of what came before. The audience remembers the insults, the framing, the certainty, and now watches all of it dissolve into polite rhetoric without explanation. That unresolved contradiction is where the comedy lives. The cognitive dissonance doesn't need a punchline. It is the joke.
Actually, I guess his little thumbs gave out and he came down the hall to work for another all-star cabinet meeting. Trump's hand-picked orange nosers gathered to pay tribute to dear leader and to suckle upon his ample teat. Whenever his approval rating gets particularly low, he rounds everybody up for one of these cabinet meetings to be showered with praise and to make nonsensical proclamations with no pushback at all.
We're going to be giving back refunds out of the tariffs because we've taken in literally trillions of dollars.
The exposure also reframes Trump's broader pattern of alliances. Loyalty and enmity aren't fixed. They slide along a scale of usefulness. Today's foe becomes tomorrow's temporary friend. Tomorrow's friend becomes next week's headline villain. Kimmel's framing turns that glitch into a highlight reel of contradiction. The comedy doesn't need exaggeration. Reality already feels overstated. The tonal leap between the two stances is so wide, it might as well be jump cut with a laugh track. Trump ends up looking like a man arguing with a time-delayed version of himself. The warming to Mominy is memorable, not for what it does for Mominy, but for what it reveals about Trump. Shows how isolated today's narrative can be, sacrificed for tomorrow's advantage, and how little concern there is for the archival echoes left behind. Kimmel doesn't accuse Trump of hypocrisy. That would invite moral debate. What's happening here is simpler, sharper, and funnier, a contradiction unfolding in real time. Preserved on tape.
I don't know if that's sarcasm or short-term memory loss. Either way, he really captures the spirit of Thanksgiving. And then the president pardoned the birds as only he can.
It looks like a rather violent bird. It's hard to play. Anyway, are you ready? Beautiful. That's nice. You are hereby unconditionally pardoned.
The sudden warmth toward Mominy strips Trump's earlier thunder of its echo. If yesterday's condemnation can evaporate this easily, the spectacle stops looking like conviction and starts looking like episodic theater. What makes the moment so effective is how unforced it feels. No angry monologue, no dramatic denunciation, just the quiet comedy of contradiction, unfolding frame by frame. Trump warming to Mominy isn't framed as growth. It's framed as an about-face, so clean it erases the skid marks leading into it. He doesn't look flexible. He looks caught rewriting his own recent past, assuming everyone will politely accept the edit. In trying to appear adaptive, he comes off inconsistent. In trying to appear pragmatic, he comes off theatrical. In trying to move forward without explanation, he hands Kimmel the cleanest possible exposure. His own words placed back, arguing with themselves. That's how Trump's sudden warmth toward Mominy stops looking like strategy and starts looking like a very public, very documented change of heart, one he forgot to explain, leaving him standing in the spotlight with yesterday's words still echoing behind him.